Some places don't appear on tourist maps. Some towns don't welcome visitors. And some secrets are buried for a reason. What you're about to hear happened in the summer of 2025. 3 friends left home for an unforgettable vacation. But only one of them would spend the rest of his life haunted by what happened there. The story begins in Texas, a place where 17-year-old Ryan Walker studied at a military high school. Ryan had spent most of his life around military families. Because of transfers, new students arrived every year. Most of them blended in, but one student was different. One Monday morning, the classroom door opened. A quiet boy stepped inside. He carried an old backpack and avoided eye contact with everyone. His name was Mason Reed. Mason had recently moved from a remote town hidden deep inside the forests of Montana, a place called Raven Creek. At first, nobody paid much attention to him, but within days, students began making fun of him. They laughed at his accent, they mocked the way he dressed, and every time he entered the classroom, the whispers started. Ryan watched this happen for days. Enough. The room became silent. Leave him alone. That single moment changed everything. From that day forward, Mason trusted Ryan. As weeks passed, the friendship grew stronger. Soon another student joined their group, a funny and energetic boy named Jake. Every lunch break, they sat together. Every afternoon, they talked for hours. And that's when Mason began telling stories about his hometown. "You guys wouldn't believe how isolated Raven Creek is," Mason said. "There are forests everywhere. Most roads disappear in winter, and some places haven't changed for decades." The more Mason talked about Raven Creek, the more curious Ryan became. One afternoon, Ryan finally asked a question that would change all of their lives. "So when are you taking us there?" Mason laughed. "You really want to visit Raven Creek?" Ryan nodded. Jake nodded too. And neither of them realized they had just taken the first step toward a nightmare. 3 months passed. Exams ended. Summer vacation finally arrived. For Ryan and Jake, it felt like the beginning of an adventure. For Mason, it felt like returning to something he had tried very hard to forget. A few days later, the trip was confirmed. Ryan's parents agreed, Jake's parents agreed, and Mason's grandmother was expecting them. Early Saturday morning, the 3 friends met outside a gas station on the edge of town. They loaded their bags into an old SUV and began the long drive north. For the first few hours, everything felt normal. Cities, traffic, restaurants, gas stations. The world felt familiar. But as they continued north, the landscape slowly began to change. The cities disappeared, the highways became smaller, and the forests became endless. Hours later, Jake looked down at his phone. "No signal," he said. Ryan checked his phone. Nothing. Mason simply stared out the window. "Don't worry," Mason said. "That's normal around here." The way he said it made Ryan uncomfortable, but he couldn't explain why. By evening, dark clouds covered the sky. Rain began hitting the windshield. For nearly an hour, nobody spoke. And then, they saw the sign. The sign looked decades old. Paint peeled from the wood. Half the letters were barely visible. Beyond the sign stood a forest so dense that sunlight barely touched the ground. The moment they crossed into Raven Creek, Ryan felt something strange. The front door opened slowly. A cold gust of air drifted out from inside the cabin. Even though it was summer, the air inside felt strangely cold. Standing inside was Mason's grandmother. She looked much older than Ryan had imagined. Her face was covered in wrinkles. Her eyes looked tired, but there was something unsettling about them. For several seconds, she simply stared at Ryan and Jake. Then, she slowly smiled. Ryan immediately felt uneasy, but he ignored the feeling. After all, it was just an old woman. Mason showed them their room. It was small, simple, and located directly across from his grandmother's room. Ryan noticed something strange immediately. There wasn't a door separating her room from the hallway, only a thick, dark curtain. "Doesn't she have a door?" Jake asked. Mason shrugged. "She likes it this way." The answer sounded strange, but nobody questioned it. The next few days were surprisingly normal. The boys explored forests, visited old hiking trails, and spent hours near a beautiful lake outside town. For a while, Ryan began believing his fears had been nothing more than paranoia. Then, the strange things started. Every night, Ryan heard footsteps, slow footsteps, walking through the hallway outside his room. At first, he assumed it was Mason's grandmother moving around the cabin. But there was something strange about those footsteps. They always stopped outside his door, and they stayed there, as if someone was standing in the darkness, watching, waiting. One night, Ryan finally gathered enough courage to open the door. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no grandmother, nobody. The next morning, he mentioned it to Mason during breakfast. For a brief moment, Mason's expression changed. His smile disappeared. Then he laughed. Probably just the old house settling. Ryan wasn't convinced. Later that evening, the boys returned from a walk through the forest. As they approached the cabin, they noticed Mason's grandmother standing among the trees. She wasn't moving. She wasn't gathering wood. She wasn't doing anything. She was simply watching them. The distance between them was at least 50 yards. Yet Ryan felt as though her eyes were locked directly onto him. A cold feeling crawled up his spine. When Jake waved at her, she didn't respond. Instead, she slowly turned around and disappeared deeper into the forest. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. At exactly 2:17 a.m., his eyes opened. The cabin was completely silent. Then he heard it. Scrape, scrape, scrape. A metallic sound, like a blade being dragged across stone. Ryan sat up immediately. Across the room, Jake was already awake. "You hear that too?" Jake whispered. Ryan nodded. The sound continued. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Slow, steady, deliberate. The sound was coming from somewhere inside the cabin. The two boys quietly climbed out of bed. Neither wanted to admit how scared they were. They slowly opened their bedroom door. The hallway was dark. Only a faint yellow light flickered somewhere ahead. The scraping sound continued. The boys followed it, step by step, their hearts pounding harder with every second. As they moved deeper into the hallway, Ryan realized where the sound was coming from. Mason's grandmother's room. The curtain covering her doorway moved slightly. The yellow light was coming from inside. Ryan swallowed hard. Jake carefully stepped forward, slowly, very slowly. He pulled the curtain aside and looked inside. For several seconds he didn't move. Then he turned toward Ryan. His face had gone completely pale. "Ryan," he whispered, "you need to see this." Ryan stepped forward and looked through the opening. What he saw made his blood run cold. Mason's grandmother was sitting on the floor. Dozens of black candles surrounded her. In front of her rested a large stone slab, and in her hands was a long hunting knife. She was sharpening it against the stone. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound echoed throughout the room, but that wasn't the worst part. Around her were dozens of small wooden figures. Each figure looked like a human being. Some had names carved into them. Others were covered in strange symbols. The grandmother was quietly chanting in a language Ryan had never heard before. The words sounded ancient, wrong, as if they didn't belong in the modern world. Then suddenly, she stopped. The room became silent. Ryan felt his stomach drop. The old woman slowly lifted her head and stared directly toward the doorway, directly at them. Neither boy moved. Neither boy breathed. For several terrifying seconds, the grandmother simply smiled. For several terrifying seconds, the grandmother simply smiled. Neither Ryan nor Jake moved. It felt as though their bodies had frozen in place. The old woman's eyes never left them. The smile on her face slowly widened. Then, something happened that Ryan would never forget. The candles around the room suddenly flickered, one by one. as if an invisible wind had passed through the room. The temperature dropped instantly. Ryan could see his own breath. His heart pounded so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Jake slowly stepped backward. Ryan was about to do the same. Then he felt a hand touch his shoulder. His entire body froze. For a moment, he thought it was Jake. Without taking his eyes off the grandmother, Ryan whispered, "Jake." There was no response. The hand remained on his shoulder, cold, unnaturally cold. Ryan slowly turned around, and what he saw nearly stopped his heart. Standing directly behind him was Mason. But something was wrong, very wrong. The friendly boy they had traveled with was gone. His face was completely expressionless. His skin looked pale, and his eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just darkness. Ryan stumbled backward. "Mason," he whispered. "What happened to you?" Mason didn't answer. For several seconds he simply stared at Ryan. Then a strange smile appeared on his face. "You shouldn't have seen this." His voice sounded different, deeper, almost as if someone else was speaking through him. Ryan's breathing became faster. Nothing made sense anymore. The grandmother, the symbols, the wooden figures, the strange footsteps, and now Mason. Everything felt like a nightmare. Then Ryan noticed something else. Jake was gone. Just seconds ago he had been standing beside him. Now he had disappeared, completely. "Jake!" Ryan called out. No answer. "Jake!" Still nothing. Panic flooded through his body. He turned toward Mason again. "Where's Jake?" Mason's smile widened. "He is exactly where he needs to be." Those words sent a wave of terror through Ryan. For the first time that night, he truly believed they were in danger. Real danger. Behind him, the grandmother began chanting again. The strange language echoed through the room. Louder this time. Faster, more aggressive. The candles started flickering violently. The shadows on the walls twisted and stretched. Ryan looked around the room. The wooden figures seemed different now, almost alive. Some appeared to be staring back at him. Others looked as if they had moved. Ryan wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run. But before he could move, the grandmother suddenly stood up. Slowly, very slowly. The hunting knife remained in her hand. Its blade reflected the candlelight. The old woman began walking toward him. One step, then another, then another. Ryan's legs finally obeyed. He turned and ran, straight into the hallway. His heart thundered inside his chest. Behind him, he could hear chanting, footsteps, and the scraping sound of metal against stone. He rushed toward his bedroom, bursting through the door, and stopped. Jake was lying on the bed, completely unconscious. Beside him stood Mason, or at least something that looked like Mason. He was staring down at Jake, watching him, waiting. Ryan rushed toward his friend. "Jake, wake up!" No response. Jake didn't move, didn't react, didn't even open his eyes. Ryan grabbed his shoulder and shook him. Nothing. It was as if he were trapped inside a deep sleep. Then Ryan noticed something. A small, fresh cut on Jake's neck. Barely visible, but definitely there. A thin line of blood ran down his skin. Ryan's stomach dropped. The exact spot where the grandmother had been staring earlier. The exact spot where the knife could have touched him. Before Ryan could react, every candle inside the cabin suddenly went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Complete darkness. Ryan couldn't see his own hands, couldn't see Jake, couldn't see Mason, couldn't see anything. Then he heard something moving in the darkness. Something very close to him, breathing. Slow, heavy, not human. Ryan backed away, terrified. And then, everything went black. Ryan opened his eyes slowly. Sunlight streamed through the cabin window. For a few moments, he simply stared at the ceiling, confused, disoriented, trying to understand what had happened. Then the memories of the previous night came rushing back. The grandmother, the candles, the knife, Mason's black eyes, the chanting, the darkness. Ryan sat up immediately. His breathing became heavy. He looked around the room. Everything appeared normal. Jake was sitting on the edge of his bed, scrolling through his phone, as if nothing had happened. Ryan stared at him. "Jake." Jake looked up. "Yeah?" Ryan hesitated. "You don't remember last night?" Jake frowned. "What happened last night?" Ryan felt a chill run through his body. "You seriously don't remember?" Jake shook his head. "I slept the entire night." Ryan didn't know what to say. Everything had felt so real, too real. Yet Jake seemed completely unaware. Trying to calm himself down, Ryan convinced himself that maybe it had been a nightmare, a vivid nightmare, nothing more. Then he noticed it. The small cut on Jake's neck. The same cut he had seen during the night. The same cut he remembered seeing beside the grandmother's knife. Ryan's blood ran cold. Maybe it hadn't been a dream after all. For the rest of the day, Ryan remained quiet. He kept watching Mason. But Mason behaved normally. He laughed. He joked. He acted exactly the way he always had. Yet something felt different. Something hidden behind his smile. The following morning, it was finally time to leave Raven Creek. The boys packed their bags, loaded the SUV, and prepared for the long drive back home. Before leaving, Ryan glanced toward the cabin one last time. The grandmother stood near the doorway, watching them, silent, motionless, just staring. The same unsettling smile remained on her face. Ryan quickly looked away. Several hours into the drive, Jake fell asleep. Mason sat quietly beside the window. For most of the journey, nobody spoke. Then Ryan noticed something. The cut on Jake's neck. It looked darker now, more noticeable, almost as if it had become infected. Ryan stared at it. Mason noticed. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Mason quietly said, "Strange place for a mark." Ryan turned toward him. "What do you mean?" Mason's eyes remained fixed on the sleeping Jake. In the old days, hunters used to mark animals there before sacrifice. Ryan felt his stomach tighten. "What are you talking about?" For the first time during the trip, Mason looked directly into his eyes and smiled. Not the friendly smile Ryan knew. Something colder, something wrong. Then he turned away and never mentioned it again. The rest of the drive passed in silence. A few weeks later, summer vacation ended. School resumed. But Mason was different. He barely spoke to Ryan. He avoided eye contact. He sat alone. And whenever Ryan approached him, he found an excuse to leave. Then one day, Mason disappeared. His father had been transferred again. He left without saying goodbye. His phone number stopped working. His social media accounts vanished. It was as if he had erased himself from existence. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. At least that's what Ryan believed. Then one morning, everything changed. Ryan received a phone call. The moment he answered, he knew something was wrong. It was Jake's father. His voice was shaking. Jake had died during the night. Ryan couldn't believe it. He thought it had to be some kind of mistake. Jake had been healthy, young, strong. There was no reason for him to die. Yet, he was gone. The official report couldn't determine the cause of death. No illness, no poison, no injuries, nothing. It made no sense. A few days later, Ryan attended the funeral. Standing beside the coffin, he looked down at his friend one final time. And there it was, the mark, still visible on Jake's neck, exactly where it had been months earlier, exactly where the grandmother's knife had been. Ryan felt his knees weaken. Suddenly, every memory came flooding back. The ritual, the wooden figures, the chanting, the black candles, the smile, and Mason's words. In the old days, hunters used to mark animals there before sacrifice. For years afterward, Ryan tried convincing himself that it was all a coincidence, a series of strange events connected by grief and fear. But deep down, he never truly believed that. Because even today, years later, something still happens. Every single year, on the same date they visited Raven Creek. Ryan wakes up at exactly 2:17 a.m. every time, without fail. And whenever he opens his eyes, he hears the same sound. A sound coming from somewhere beyond the darkness. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Like a blade being sharpened against stone, waiting patiently, as if something unfinished still remains. And sometimes, when Ryan gathers enough courage to look toward his bedroom door, he sees a figure standing there, motionless, watching him. An old woman, smiling. The same smile he saw in Raven Creek. The same smile that has haunted him for years. And every time he blinks, the figure disappears. But the scraping sound remains. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Some trips change your life forever, and some places never let you leave. The end.